You want revenge on your toxic job, and you are not alone. According to survey data, 67% of people who have survived a toxic workplace want to get revenge on it. In this video, I'm going to share the best and only type of toxic job revenge you need to get and the wrong types you need to avoid. But first, we need to talk about what you're really looking for when you seek revenge on your toxic workplace. I need to be clear. Most people aren't scheming and plotting ways to take down their ex-toxic boss or coworkers. I don't think you are either. What you are doing is daydreaming about exposing the toxic work culture you experienced. You want karma to do its job, and you are low-key willing to help it. As I mentioned, this is fairly common for toxic workplace survivors. Yet, so many people wonder why, for the first time in their lives, they are mentally plotting ways to get revenge on their toxic ex, company that is. The reason why you're thinking about getting revenge on your toxic job is simple. You want justice. You expect the world to be fair, but in your toxic work environment, you were mistreated, you were undermined, and your professional reputation was dragged through the mud. An eye for an eye would be for your toxic boss to suffer exactly what you did, and for their toxicity to be exposed. They put you through hell. They deserve the same, right? But we need to go below the surface here to what you're really thinking about, and that is how you're going to regain your power after a toxic workplace. The overarching theme across all toxic work experiences I have heard about is disempowerment. I have yet to hear a toxic workplace story where you did not feel powerless. And if that just hit a nerve, let me know in the comments. You were treated badly. Your toxic manager took credit for your work, and worse, there was nothing you could do about it. In most toxic work dynamics, the toxic players are protected, which really means your toxic boss and your toxic coworkers were enabled. You were powerless in that toxic work situation. And the one way you can think to take your power back is taking it back from them, by getting revenge. Ultimately, you think that getting revenge on your toxic job will make you feel better. And it might for a minute. Like clicking post on that bad review will release drama-fueled dopamine to your brain, but that rapidly dissipates. And then what happens? Well, according to researchers, compounding harm to you. Stooping to their level will do a number on your psyche. And when you're dealing with a toxic person, they're likely to retaliate. Now, disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, but there may be legal implications. I have heard horror stories about toxic workplace survivors getting sued by their toxic company for posting a bad review online. When you leave a toxic job, and especially if you're dealing with post-toxic job syndrome, all you want to do is feel better, to get your life and your career back on track. Now, there is one type of revenge that will almost guarantee you get everything that you want, but most people pursue the wrong types of revenge, and I don't want you to make one of these mistakes. But before we get into that, it's essential that you get clear on if you're experiencing post-toxic job syndrome and to understand how it influences both you and your career. Otherwise, you're walking around with toxic job maladaptions that you're not even aware of, and you're at a high risk of finding yourself in a toxic job loop. You can take the free assessment to find out at toxicjobquiz.com. One of my favorite go-to comfort movies is Kill Bill. We can psychoanalyze that later, but I love seeing a powerful femme getting revenge. It just heals an inner part of me. And I want you to get revenge too, but not the wrong kind. Because the wrong kind will lead to the problems that I just mentioned. Now, I know you're asking, what are the wrong types of toxic workplace revenge? There are 3 common types that I see. And we have to start with the most prolific one: writing bad reviews online. You've probably already lurked sites like Glassdoor and reveled at the 1-star reviews. Reading them, you at least know that you're not the only one that had a toxic work experience at that company. It's strangely validating. And somewhat out of revenge and somewhat out of a desire to warn others, you think about writing a negative review.
That'll show them.
The second is similar but more direct. You think about exposing them. Some people do this on the way out the door of their toxic jobs, torching their toxic manager in the exit interview, as if it's going to make any difference at all. Or maybe you just think about spilling tea to your former coworkers about what was really going on. Then we have the third most common response: daydreaming about suing the living shit out of them. I have spoken with a lot of toxic workplace survivors who want to litigate what happened in court, file claims, and make them pay. And once again, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. And if the law has been broken, my justice-seeking brain wants it to play out in court. But not every case meets that threshold, and no one talks about the financial and the psychological burden of taking action. A friend of mine pursued a lawsuit and an EEOC filing and spent years going through the legal motions while paying her lawyer tens of thousands of dollars. Eventually, it tapped her savings dry and she had to drop the suit. Which brings me to why these actions won't really get revenge. For starters, these actions don't have any impact on the toxic people that you worked with. Instead, it proves that they're living in your head rent-free when they don't think about you at all. The other reason why these types of revenge are flawed is a fundamental reason. Retribution will not heal you. Will you get that tiny dopamine hit for a minute that I mentioned? Sure, but it will not make you powerful. It does not restore justice and fairness, and it will not make you feel better sustainably. Instead, retribution can create new toxic cycles and further diminish your self-concept. And let's face it, you've already suffered enough because of your toxic job. Ultimately, these types of toxic job revenge are aimed at the wrong person, and they make your toxic boss or your toxic coworkers the main characters of your story. Which brings me to the one type of revenge you should get. Nay, you need to get. In fact, getting this type of revenge should be your number one priority after you leave a toxic job, or even when you're still in it. Over the last few years, I have helped thousands of people get out and over their toxic jobs. And there is only one type of revenge that truly serves what you intend it to do. It is the only one that reestablishes your power, gets you justice, and is the only way to ditch the misery of your toxic job and rebuild your confidence. Make your toxic job irrelevant. As long as the toxic people you worked with live in your head rent-free, your confidence, your career, and your earning potential cannot recover. Too many people I speak with have let their toxic jobs define them. And since it defines them, it haunts them for years. I don't want that to happen to you, bestie. Retribution won't bring justice to your toxic work experience. It prolongs your anguish. Here's what you're gonna do instead. You are going to be the main character. You will revoke your energy away from those toxic people who made your life miserable and don't deserve it in the first place, and you will focus on healing. The best revenge you can get is thriving after a toxic workplace. I know that sounds almost impossible, especially when you're experiencing post-toxic job syndrome, but I promise you it is way easier than you think. In fact, you can start right now. Go watch this video now where I'm going to tell you exactly how to get back your pre-toxic job self step by step.